we made a choice to do it this way, where we now do podcasting after gym.
Yeah, well, look, to be fair, gym is a bit of gentle stretching for me. I don't do the sweat session that destroyed you this morning.
Yeah, good grief. We both go to T Generation Gyms, which is a sort of trans specialist gym. Yeah, really run by an incredible transhuman Sam Dengate. And Michael's been going there. Oh, we've both known Sam for a pretty long time, and we were like, this is the good way to do our Saturday mornings. We'll go to gym, but I go to the strength class because I don't do anything else.
I don't do anything else either. 145-minute of gentle stretching. That's my entire workout regime.
Right, fair enough. Well, I think it's not. I think you have other workouts.
Well, life.
We'll keep it PG on the podcast.
Yes. Doing damn squats.
45 minutes of intense stretching.
And cut for opening.
Hi, I'm Michael Earp.
And I'm Bailey Turner.
Welcome to Michael's Walk.
The podcast.
Michael's Walk is a road trip, a search for something. Spoilers! It's myself, and it was inside all along.
If only it were that simple.
Driven by Tori Amos's album, Scarlett's Walk, I'm recreating the journey Scarlett took in its 20th anniversary year.
I'll also be there.
With the loving and patient,
Always patient.
support of Bailey and Teague Lee, 3 trans queers set out across America
That's 33 states in 55 days.
to connect with the songs, the land that inspired them, and the fans inspired by the songs. We'll talk music, travel, healing, and hope as we ask the questions: how do I heal from 15 years of coercive control and manipulation?
And what role does the music we listen to play in our own relationship narratives?
We've self-produced this podcast and trip.
You can support us via GoFundMe.
For the full story, head to michaelerp.net.
So here we are. Also, it's a very different recording schedule for us in that they're 2 weeks apart. Whereas on the road, we were doing them wherever we could grab a moment.
I'm trying to remember some of the places. I remember doing it on doing it on Alexander Leisure Small's kitchen table.
Yes.
And on the bed in Aspen.
And in that really, really dodgy hotel. Wait, did we record in Texas?
I have a feeling we tried to.
But it was just
But
too
something
noisy.
went, yeah, that's right, it was too noisy. It was too many domestic situations happening around us.
We also tested recording in the car, but the road noise was out of control.
Yeah, not ideal. I mean, we were squeezing in every chance we got.
I was editing while we were driving.
Yes, good grief, bless you.
Which means I missed a lot of the scenery at times because I was trimming
Zeroed in on.
ums and ahs and let's try that again.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Goodness sake.
This is much more civilized. Once every 2 weeks. I've got time to edit it
Yeah.
in the comfort of my own home.
And, I think we've both put our mics at similar places, so, it's not like me blasting, speaking into the thing, and you're nice and quiet. Like we've got.
Yes. I'm also able to edit the sound levels a bit better, so hopefully it's a better listening experience for everyone.
Bless you, and thank you all for listening and putting up with us. I think you were saying a second ago that someone's reached out and been like, I didn't know this was a thing, I'm going to go back and listen to it all. And we're like, ugh.
Well, I actually replied, well, it's a lot of rambling. You're in for a lot of rambling. To which they replied, I love rambling. So good luck
Goodness sake.
with the rambling.
It's Seaside.
Seaside.
Is our sort of hidden treasure that we are fashioning the second episode around.
A weighty song.
Very. Talk about the story of the song, because I know that you're pretty familiar with Tori's sort of influences in writing this.
So Tori said she wrote this after she received a letter from a young girl who had lost a friend and a cousin, or just a friend? now I'm forgetting the actual story, to a suicide bomber in the Middle East. And so this is very much about the loss that happens during war and loss of innocence. There was the lyric, she was coming of age, all of that sort of thing.
Which obviously is incredibly pertinent and potent now. I mean, Scarlet's Walk just seems to really have even more to say with the times we're in terms of, obviously this album came out as a real deep commentary on the post-September 11 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and Saudi Arabia, and September 11 suited a lot of political and military agendas in America, and weapons of mass destruction that were being sort of and sort of excuse after excuse as to why there was continued invasion of the territories and military occupation of the territories. And this is in the sort of early noughties, and now we're 20 years later and we're seeing a very similar situation happen orbiting around October 7th in an attack in Israel. But obviously times have changed, and we just have more insight and we have more knowledge and we have more access to what's kind of going on the ground, in a way that we just didn't have when we were relying on, Good Morning
News
Australia and, Today breakfast shows to tell us what was kind of happening, in spite of many efforts to remove and murder journalists in the region who are sort of bringing that truth out. Anyway, we were really clear that this episode needed to be respectful of what is happening in Palestine and in Lebanon in particular. There's similar real, tragedies happening over there, and we've got situations not too far away in the Congo and Sudan, and we wanted to just sort of connect those dots for listeners. And I think it's just so important now more than ever that people are really clear as to where we're at on that, and where we stand, as it were, and what we stand against in particular.
Yeah, no ambiguity.
No, absolutely not. So this song just sort of, when we sort of had a review of it for the episode, we were just like, well, we're here now, we're experiencing it here. It's particularly because one of the big pieces of this particular war that has really enabled more insight from humanity is the place of children in the conflict. And that seems to be the sort of ground on which everyone can come to the table on it, is to recognize that the killing of children and the eradication of entire generations of Palestinians is wrong in every sense. I think that's been a big part of it. And watching the discourse from late last year of trying to remind people that this isn't just Palestinian men who are sort of, we kind of have this idea that when it's just kind of men in uniforms who are dying, we kind of don't respond in the same way as we do when we were sort of going, no, this is babies, and infants and toddlers, and that they're just the images of children has just been so potent to people getting on board, tragically.
So it's hard not to draw those parallels when you've got phrases in the lyrics like innocence targeted, what God is this? Because that's it exactly. They're deliberately being targeted.
Yeah.
It's not an accident, it's not collateral damage,
No.
It is a very strategic plan.
Yeah, absolutely. With a lot of blame being laid. But if we kind of crack into sort of our trip, when we went to the States, there were a lot of people who sort of told us, be careful and look out. And there were shootings still happening all over the place. Someone was shot in New York, like literally the day, or a number of people were shot in New York the day before we arrived there. Yeah. But it's kind of so interesting looking at the differences between, it was only 2 years ago, literally, that we were there.
Yeah.
Which was before all of this, and is how different an experience we had then versus what we would potentially have now.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I'd have quite the same trip.
Oh, but I don't know if we'd go.
If we'd even do it, exactly.
It's some of those things where I'm so glad that we did go when we did, because, there's no way that I would feel anywhere near comfortable to take the journey we took now.
Yeah.
And certainly not to kind of, do things like this where we are kind of, even writing the poems, it feels very bizarre to be writing about America and writing in sometimes really romantic ways about America, or, looking into things, because I go, well, my relationship with this continent has changed so drastically in the last 2 years. And I'm trying to sort of figure out the balance of how to help let that color what I'm creating, but not kind of erode the reality of the experience we had, which by and large was a wonderful, safe, for all, it was emotionally intense.
Yeah, precisely. Goodness. What a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Everything is now, and it's just baffling at the people that like to pretend that the dumpster fire is not going on.
Yeah, or that it's not their problem.
Yeah.
I have someone in my life who I really considered a friend, who told me that some wars are just, and some, like this, in response to me going, you cannot stand there and tell me that what we're seeing come out is okay. And it's like, well, if we stop, then they'll start rocketing Tel Aviv again. And, sometimes some wars are just. It's like there's nothing remotely just about any of what's happened in that region. When in the earlier days, when I had more people kind of opposing my stance on freeing Palestine and freeing all occupied territories, this isn't just a Palestine thing. This continent that you and I live on, the indigenous people of this land need to be liberated. This isn't just one rule for the goose, one for the gander. This is all occupied territories need to be liberated from white oppression, period. And if that requires me to put my body in the bin, then so be that. Because that is where we sort of go, we need to cohese it, but we also need to recognize where this is where the path has led us.
Yeah.
The path of white rule has led us to this, and a paradigm shift needs to be happening, period. In the early days when people were first kind of pushing back against me and I was losing friends, left and right, is how it felt. And I was having argument after argument after argument. Someone told me to follow someone on Instagram who is a real spokesperson for Israel. And I did that out of, deference and out of care to the people in my life who are Jewish, and watched this human being who said, oh, well, all religions deserve a nation state. Like, everyone gets one. You're allowed to have a nation state as a religion. And I went, you've already proven that there's a wrongness to everything that you're putting out there and everything you are convincing your community of, because that's not true. Religions aren't entitled to land. And that is the issue here. And we're seeing the result of that issue is that we go, when an occupying territory has an issue, it makes it easy for them to make that about religious persecution. And multiple people have a religious relationship with that land, including Christians. My fear is that this will whirlpool in a sense where we'll start to have, the sort of Catholic and Christian and sort of, that supremacy decide to go, well, let's sort this right out and go, well, we're going to lay our claim now, and that's it. It's going to be game over when our next world war is a religious war.
Yeah.
But this idea that, living of a certain religion entitles you to particular land is such a dangerous idea, and we're seeing the risk of that danger, or the outcome of that danger now, because it doesn't. And I understand that you live your life that way. How long we've been doing this whole human thing, and with everything that we have learned and everything we've gone with, this is still how we're playing with each other.
Yeah.
By going, here are my, made up rules for life. And not only am I going to live them for my own enjoyment and for my own sense of security and safety and salvation, I'm going to punish you and enforce them upon you and shame you, kill you, for real, should you elect not to follow those rules that I've decided for myself and now I'm deciding for everyone.
Yeah.
How are we still in that brain set? It boggles me. Absolutely boggles me that that's still how, a great majority of human beings are sort of operate. That's their operating system.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm doing a lot of talking on this episode.
Well, I was just going to say, how has living through the increased visibility? Because even though there's the sort of idea that this has been going on since October, it's been going on
for decades.
Decades and decades.
Obviously, since the Nakba in 48. So we're technically, that's 80 years ago. But there are people who are still alive who were alive during the Nakba.
Yeah.
And, there are so many events that predated that as well. And if you don't know what the Nakba is, you're 8 months into a global conflict. Do some reading, please. But I mean, even I first heard about this relationship between Israel and Palestine back in the, I remember it from when I was young. They made jokes about it on The Nanny. And it was like a part of a joke made in the movie Clueless, which is another movie from the sort of 90s, where Cher and her stepbrother, watched like a bit of a clip on CNN about conflict in the Gaza Strip. Like, George Clooney's wife was like a critical figure in UN's investigation into war violations on the Strip. And that was back ages before October 7th, 2023. It's just one of the many, many selling points and propaganda points that, Zionist media and Zionist occupation forces are desperate to have the world buy into.
Late last year, I was reading a book that I had bought while we were in Seattle.
You're right.
Called Conflict is Not Abuse. And it's a Jewish lesbian who was writing about it's been a while since I've read it, so I'm now going to butcher everything. It's really fascinating. It's quite academic, but I bought it because it was in the queer section, and I thought, well, I'm exploring abuse. The title itself is quite provocative, and I wanted to see what she had to say about it. And I guess the basic, very watered down crux of her argument is feeling discomfort is not having someone abuse you, and when you escalate that as harm, you then inflict harm yourself in retaliation, etc., etc. And she explores this on every level, from friendship or colleague interactions through to, she has an entire chapter on how the media represents the ongoing occupation of Gaza.
Yeah, right.
And this was published like 3 or 4 years ago, and that chapter
Which means it was
itself
written 5 years ago.
was written, first published separately years before that, maybe back as far as 2011 or something.
Yeah, right.
And that's a Jewish person observing the propaganda and misinformation that goes on national news regarding this exact situation. It's not news.
It's appalling.
October
It's appalling.
But how have you found working creatively in such a time?
It's really hard. It's really hard. I'm still really figuring out how to find the balance between investing everything I have into it and investing nothing. It's like I just don't have it to sort of live in this sort of immobilization of feeling like there's nothing I can do that's going to make a difference versus I need to be doing everything I possibly can. And absolutely it's the latter. I just need to keep pushing on that and keep talking about it and keep, having the stance that I have and keep showing up to, in all my life, I've never known a protest program like it. I've never known protests to be anything more than one day on one weekend. This is every week, every Sunday, people are groups of various sizes are turning out to protest. It's so painful and so destructive of the creative spirit to kind of know that we're operating in a system. I don't know, where I just find myself saying too often to people oh, the government need to do something. And I just go, there's too much money. There's too much money in it. Like in the longer run, which is how, conservative governments view life and the world, they're thinking about the, hundreds of millions of dollars in the ground under Gaza and in the ground out, in the bodies of water off Gaza. There's too much money in the real estate that Israel has already talked about putting up and looking at this war as a demolition process as much as an occupation process. There's money in it. They're already selling apartments, like they're trying to get around a trade route that was proposed by, I can't remember who proposed it, but it was basically going to put China at sort of the helm of a trade route. And obviously America and England can't have that. So it's on Israel to defend that kind of region, defend their interests in that region and, the trade routes. And which is why, the minute that Amazon packages couldn't get through Yemen, we just started bombing the crap out of it because we had people blockading ships to prevent inactivity, and then all of those people were labelled terrorists and killed.
Yeah.
It's the ability to be creative when that's kind of all bouncing around in your brain is tricky.
Yeah.
How have you found it?
Very similar. I've been trying to do what I can to contribute, but I've also more and more felt overwhelmed with a sense of ineffectuality. Everything from not just how to make a difference in this ongoing situation, but what does any of my creative work mean? Like, what's the point of anything? For actually most of this year, I've been having a pretty prolonged depressive episode. I'm only just recently starting to feel some kind of turnaround with that. But ever since January, I've really felt this mix of, why am I even working on this book? Like, what's the point when this is how the world operates? Trying to do my part, but then not seeing any change. In fact, it just goes on and on and on and on. And then you find out that yet another organization is funded by Zionist money and practically all of the arts industry. And so where does that leave? Yeah, anyway, it's been really tough, and I'm certainly not even at the center of it or feeling it as hard as a lot of people out
100%.
there. So I just have tried to keep on going and doing what I can.
And that's all any of us can do, really, is just, if today is the day that you read something or today is the day you say something, that's okay. Like, it's not that no one's ever too late to find out what you need to find out about this. And to be honest, I'd rather that, anyone read something and got on board with any part of it. If you do the reading and you decide that you are sort of, where before you were inactive in the conversation, but now you are vehemently on the side of Israel, I'd rather that than people just stay going, oh, I don't want to really, I'm not political, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Teague told me he saw a post online somewhere that was a great description that basically this whole situation, and that's everything, not just Palestine and Gaza, but more globally, and then also, trans rights and queer rights and
climate justice.
All of it is a giant knot. And so if you are helping to pull at one tiny thread to unravel this giant knot, you are contributing.
Yeah.
You don't have to dive into the center of the knot in order to make a difference.
Yeah.
If everyone pulls on their own little thread, then everything can change.
All of that being said, and it was said beautifully, I do want to sort of just do a little celebration moment for the fact that you released a book this week.
Oh, yay.
An incredible collection called Avast, which is a collection of adult fiction written by trans authors, all centering around the theme of pirates. And we had a hoot of a launch earlier this week, and I got a little bit misty-eyed hearing you talk about, one of the questions from the audience during the Q&A was, what's next for you? And we had, obviously Michael was there and one of the other authors from the collection. And you said, well, there's nothing standing between me and my memoir now. There's nothing now in my way. And it was just that way of phrasing it really kind of cracked me a lot. With just going, this is it, it's coming, And, I tell this story, oh no, I tell this story to a few people recently, and watching people who don't know us, we've obviously, when I meet new people, I talk about, it usually comes out from people going, how did me and my boyfriend meet? And I'm like, well, I was traveling around America with my friend who was writing a book. And they were writing about, surviving an abusive relationship while they traveled with their current partner and their ex-partner, who's now their best trans girlfriend. Like, it was just, the dynamic is so wild, and people are just kind of, they boggle, and it excites people. And so to know that, there's just been so many obstacles in your way, and now there really are none by your own capacity. And that's still a lot. That's still a big, it's still a big hurdle to overcome, but we're getting nearer. And on some level, going back to your point earlier about, well, what is the point of this? I think like the whole thread notion, it's, yes, you kind of do undo your own thread. But if you have the opportunity, if you have the ability to kind of pursue your own fulfillment in any fashion, alongside pulling at those threads and doing your part, fucking do it. Because that's an incredible blessing that need not be wasted. And we all have to heal in order to have all the strength to pull at those threads. And if you're a person where part of your healing is some form of creative expression, then that's how you're built.
But I went through several months of not doing any work on it at all, and therefore, because I'd told myself that I'm not doing any other creative projects until this one is done, not doing any creative anything for most of this year, because I think I mentioned in the last episode, but in January of this year I finished the first draft. It was twice as long as it should be, and so I'm in the process now of editing it back to a more accessible length and honing what I'm saying a bit more specifically. Yeah, I've gone quite a long time of doing very little work on it, but I think since starting this podcast, it's helped, like starting back up, get my mind back on it. And in the last couple of weeks, I've actually been chipping away, and I find that when I do sit down to it, I get through it a lot faster than I think. So gently, the mental hurdle of it being such an enormous task is moving to the point where I'm like, well, with a week's worth of, and when I say a week's worth, that's, spread out over however long, but a week's worth of focused attention could get my second draft down, and then I'll get beta readers involved, and at that point get some feedback on having it read from start to finish to see if it's actually working from a reader's perspective. And then, so all of it is starting to feel a bit more achievable, and that end point of actually getting people to read it, even if it's critique readers before then pitching to agents and publishers, doesn't feel as far away as it has for the longest time.
That makes me very, very happy.
Yay.
That's great.
So, I'll keep saying in these podcast episodes fortnightly how I'm going with it all. So at the moment, I am halfway through the 4th section out of 18 sections. So, and I know each section is very different length. Some are much longer than others. Yeah, I'm getting there.
Oh my God, I'm just like having a bit of a peek. So Michael's got it on their computer, and I'm just seeing you're up to Disney World.
I'm up to Disney World, and
which is still about halfway through the trip. But then again, a lot of that trip is
a quarter of the way. It's like 2 weeks in.
Florida? Oh no, New York was halfway.
New York was halfway.
But it's nuts to think about. Yes, we're in Disney World, and
Tig
that was not Michael's favourite day.
Tig,
but me and Tig
said to me the other day, "Make sure you say how much of a dick you were." I'm like, "Yes, I'm writing it in." He was like, "You were such a brat." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Don't worry, it's gonna be there on the page."
Yeah, it was hot. It was a boiling hot day.
Yeah, and I wore synthetics.
Yeah, right.
That was a poor choice. But anyway.
You bought a top while we were there, though, didn't you? Didn't you buy something cotton while we were there at the shop?
The entire day's mission was to find a top, but I refused to buy one that I wouldn't wear again.
Of course. And being that you're not a Disney person, very little of the options were in your wheelhouse than what you would ordinarily
But by about 5:30 in the afternoon, I managed to find a singlet top that ended up costing me 75 Australian
right.
dollars.
Goodness sake.
Yeah.
I wore a bra. I wore like a glorified bra with like this, oh God, to put a photo up somewhere.
It was wasn't it a...
It's like a little crop top thing,
Yeah.
but it's definitely bought from the swimwear portion of a hippy dippy shop up in Cairns. But here we go. That's exciting. For my own part, I've just been kind of, when we were traveling, I did a lot of, because I was driving a lot, I would sort of go to Michael, can you voice note something? And then I would talk into the phone, or I would like ask Michael to like jot something down. And so I have this big sort of document with all these notes of stuff, and then I've also got a bunch of just like kind of cutting room floor clips of previous poems that I feel like are kind of have been communicating with me that this is the collection they want to be a part of. So it's going to be a bit of a collaging process in the next little while, because a lot of the poems I've done so far I've just kind of written flat out. They've just kind of come from nothing, and they've kind of just come from the spirit and gone straight onto the page. But I feel like then I don't want to kind of keep writing like that. I do want to kind of be respectful to what was really present for me whilst we were tripping. So I'm sort of gonna do a bit of a cut and paste. It's my plan for this weekend, if I get a bit of a moment, is to head to Officeworks and do a bunch of printing and do a bit of cutting, which is actually a tip that Tori taught me when I met her on tour in Brisbane. We did like a meet and greet, and it was such a beautiful day because I managed to get away with flying there for work so I could meet a client. I'm doing a lot of finger
air quotations.
Quoting, and I was going to grab this meeting, fly there, have this meeting, and then run to the meet and greet, which you're not really supposed to do because most people at the meet and greets are there super early. But I asked someone to see if they could like hold a place for me in the line. Which is super not okay. So it was always like, I would never like hold it above anyone, like, but just like, can just people remember that I'm part of the line. And anyway, I like bolted there in a taxi and ran, and I was like one of the last people to see her, and she gave me a really good amount of time. I'd worn this really special top that I'd made, and I was like, I'm a writer and this stuff that you write fascinates me. And she was like, and one of the things she said was, if you're ever sort of feeling like you're a bit overwhelmed with what you've got to write, just like chuck a bunch of it in a hat, give it a bit of a mix around and pull that out and write off that. Like just use, that's the one that you need to write because that's the one that came out of the hat. The other tip that she gave me was, words don't have to mean what you think they mean. Words have a billion different meanings. Like just because we've ascribed this particular word like fork to this food instrument doesn't mean that fork can't and isn't interested in, like the word fork is interested in also being what an exercise bike is called. Like sometimes the folks say, I want to be what an exercise bike, and it's the idea of that really, I really loved it. Which reminded me about, I was doing some Googling before we got here about jangle jangle, which is part of the lyrics in Seaside, and how I didn't realize that jangle jangle is a phrase to describe proving a point, and it's from sort of Middle Eastern, Arabic, even South Asian areas where people wear a lot of bracelets culturally, and proving a point, when you shake your kind of hands and you kind of, for emphasis, and it creates that jangle jangle sound. And so it was a way to describe that, if you would sort of say, well, that's exactly my point, jangle jangle, like, you kind of would deliver it in that way. And I was like, that's really cool, and feels like a really cool way for, I'm hoping that was kind of part of why she wrote.
In the same way that I often say, like, something or rather shakes fist.
Yeah, literally that. Yeah, 100%. Shall we get on to Song Swap?
Yeah, this one, interesting one for Song Swap.
I put a couple down. Imagine by John Lennon, which most Tory ears with feet, will kind of recognise the value of that in this particular context, where the song Imagine by John Lennon was on a list of songs that were banned and were not to be played on American radio because there was a political agenda to not promote peace.
Post 9/11.
Post 9/11, yeah, I should say. A number of sort of songs were sort of banned in that way, which was of particular pertinence to Tori because she was the first musical guest artist to be on the Letterman show. I believe it's the Letterman show.
My mind's gone blank.
Yeah, can't remember who it was, but a late night sort of show. So basically when 9/11 happened, a lot of, talk shows and shows kind of went dark for a while. And when this particular sort of show came back, oh God, the ears of feet are going to like ream me out for not knowing who it was. I can see him and everything, and it's not David Letterman. But anyway, she found out she could not play Imagine on that show. It was part of this sort of band song list, and so she played Time, which was sort of a cover, which happened to be on her album Strange Little Girls, the cover album she'd done. But so Imagine is just sort of this beautiful song advocating for peace that often gets sort of deprioritized and banned in instances because people are afraid of the power of it. And obviously Imagine speaks very directly to kind of war experiences. And the other one I had was a song called Sarah by Kate Miller-Heidke, and this song kind of haunted me for a long time. It's sort of semi-fictionalized, but the song is basically about going to a music festival with her friend, and then her friend disappears and kind of vanishes, and the situation happens when a girl goes missing, and basically the girl turns up 2 weeks later and is obviously very traumatized, but doesn't really know where she was or what kind of happened to her. And it's based on a real story of a particular girl who went missing from a music festival. I don't think the girl was Kate Miller-Heidke's actual friend, but was sort of a news story about this girl who disappeared for 2 weeks and kind of just turned up randomly quite some time later and didn't have any recollection of where she'd been or what had happened, and just the impact on life of those families in those 2 weeks. And I don't know, when I think about Seaside and just it's a particularly pertinent and song that kind of hits me emotionally, particularly because it makes me think of my sister, loss of innocence, and you just kind of think about the young girls in your life. It's about the loss of young women. But 5th of December is also my brother's birthday. And those who know me know that I lost my brother about getting towards 6 years ago now, who passed away as a passenger in a car accident. So this song really speaks to me about loss of children and that innocence. So Sarah just kind of sprung to mind. What did you have?
I struggled to think of ones that were quite relevant, and Bailey did suggest one to me that immediately I knew was right, so I'm stealing it as my suggestion. The Icicle Melts by the Cranberries, which is very much about children dying in war situations and asking the question, how could you hurt a child? Does this make you satisfied? And so, it absolutely is pertinent to not only Seaside, but the current situation.
And a real reminder about, this is not an isolated situation. If you're, especially if you're sort of younger, you might sort of go, oh God, this is, the worst ever. Like, this actually has been happening in areas like the Congo and Sudan. This happens all the time and has been happening for decades, for generations. Back in the sort of early noughties, it was Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq. And back in the sort of mid to late 90s, it was all happening over in Ireland and happening in sort of upper part of the UK. Like, we have yet to live in a time where children aren't being killed for political or manufacturing gain or religious, and as part of religious persecution, which is what the Troubles really were related to, was about the schism between Catholicism and Protestantism. The Icicle Melts is referencing directly the Troubles.
And then that led me to think of another song by an artist that I absolutely love called Kill J, as in the word kill and then the letter J. And this particular song is called Strange Fruits of the Sea, which she wrote after a refugee boat disaster. Pretty much everyone on the boat drowned, and the rest, I don't know if there was no rescue or they didn't get there in time, but everyone died from that boat. And
I think if it's the one that I'm thinking of, the message was that they couldn't get there in time.
right, yeah, exactly.
But the likely reality was that all those people were left behind, and the rescue moved very, very slowly in order to have the outcome that it was.
She's like an electronic alt pop singer.
Very grimesy kind of.
Yeah, really quite high-pitched voice. I think she's quite unique and spectacular and very obsessed. But for them to have an album, well, a song on her album that is quite political, even though the lyrics are a bit like Tory, a bit obtuse, like strange sea fruits in the water. Who's protecting the borders? Like, mama, this could be your daughter. It's really, really powerful.
And obviously such a huge reference to Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday.
Yes.
which has been covered by many incredible artists, but is including Tory, rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, but about just a very racism charged songs about, and so this is really about the global war on brown bodies.
Yes,
Black and brown bodies that is sort of, that is not ended.
so check those songs out, and they'll be in the playlist that we're keeping track of all of these song recommendations. You can also shoot us through your own song swap recommendations too for any of these or past episodes or future episodes. If you know something else on Scarlet Hidden Treasures is coming up, by all means get in advance so we can do your song swap as part of the episode. That'd be fun.
And like any questions or reflections, or especially like, if there'll be people who are listening who actually saw us on the trip, and we were a bit delirious. So if there's memories that you have of the trip that you want us to share that we had with you, we're always keen to kind of bring all those memories. And maybe it's worth letting people know what the next episode's going to be based around, so they can prepare some questions or reflections or thoughts.
The next one we have planned is Tom Bigby. We haven't quite worked out the order from there, but we'll get to that.
Letting Scarlet's Hidden Treasures speak to us and let us know where that would like to fall in the remains of the days.
But thanks once again for listening, and we look forward to next time.
Yay, bye.
The Michael's Walk podcast acknowledges that the journey they are undertaking takes place on the sacred and unceded nations of many proud Indigenous peoples. From the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, we are fortunate to call home, to each and every Native American tribe's land we'll set foot on as we travel. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and humbly acknowledge their sovereignty.